The auditorium was packed that evening. Thousands of people filled every seat, and the energy in the room was electric. Cameras were rolling, lights were blazing, and everyone was waiting to see who would take the stage next. This was one of the biggest talent competitions in the country, and people from all over had come to watch dreams come true or fall apart in front of their eyes. Backstage, dozens of contestants waited nervously. Some were practicing their lines. Others were stretching or doing vocal warm-ups. And then, there was her. A tiny girl sitting alone on a plastic chair in the corner. She was only 8 years old, and she looked even smaller in that crowded space full of adults and teenagers. Her legs dangled off the chair because her feet couldn't reach the floor. She held a crumpled piece of paper in her hands, the lyrics to her song, even though she already knew every word by heart. Her name was Lily, and she had never been on a stage this big before. In fact, she had never been on any real stage at all. The only audience she had ever performed for was her mother, in their small apartment where the walls were thin and the neighbors sometimes complained about the noise. But Lily didn't care about any of that right now. All she could think about was the moment she had been dreaming of for as long as she could remember. A production assistant walked over and kneeled down in front of her. He looked at his clipboard and then back at the little girl. He asked if she was ready. Lily nodded, but her hands were shaking. The man gave her a kind smile and told her she would be going on in 5 minutes. 5 minutes. That was all the time she had left before her whole life could change. Out in the audience, Lily's mother sat in one of the back rows. She couldn't afford the expensive seats near the front, but it didn't matter. She just wanted to be there. She had taken the day off work, which meant losing a full day's pay, but there was no way she was going to miss this. She clasped her hands together and whispered a quiet prayer. She had watched her daughter sing 1,000 times at home, and she knew what that little girl was capable of. But she also knew how cruel the world could be, and she was terrified of what might happen if things didn't go well. The host walked out onto the stage and grabbed the microphone. He was a tall man with a big smile and an even bigger voice. He welcomed the audience and introduced the next performer. He said her name and mentioned that she was only 8 years old. A few people in the crowd chuckled. Others whispered to each other, "An 8-year-old? On this stage? This should be interesting." The judges sat behind their long table at the front of the stage. There were 4 of them, all well-known names in the music industry. They had seen everything over the years: child prodigies, hopeless dreamers, and everything in between. One of the judges, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, leaned over to the man next to her and muttered something under her breath. He nodded and shrugged. They had both already made up their minds. Kids this young rarely had what it took to impress them. Cute, maybe, but not real talent. Not the kind that wins competitions. And then Lily walked out. The spotlight hit her like a wave of heat. She froze for a second, blinded by the brightness. The stage seemed impossibly huge, stretching out in every direction. The audience was just a blur of shadows beyond the lights, but she could feel their eyes on her. Thousands of people, all staring, all waiting. Her heart was pounding so hard, she could hear it in her ears. She was wearing a simple dress that her mother had made by hand. It was light blue, with small white flowers stitched along the hem. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't designer, but her mother had spent 3 nights working on it after her shifts ended, sewing by the dim light of a single lamp so she wouldn't wake Lily up. That dress meant everything. Lily walked slowly to the center of the stage. Her shoes, a pair of old sneakers that were slightly too big for her, squeaked against the polished floor with every step. She could hear the sound echoing through the silent auditorium, and it made her cheeks burn with embarrassment. When she finally reached the microphone stand, she realized it was too tall for her. She had to stretch up on her tiptoes just to reach it, and even then, her voice would barely be picked up. A stagehand rushed over and quickly adjusted the stand, lowering it to her height. The audience watched in silence. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This was already awkward, and the performance hadn't even started yet. The host asked Lily what she would be singing tonight. She opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. Her throat felt dry, like someone had stuffed it with cotton. She swallowed hard and tried again. This time, her voice came out in a tiny whisper. She said the name of the song, but most people in the audience couldn't hear her. The host leaned in and asked her to repeat it. She did, a little louder this time, and he nodded. Then he asked her why she had chosen this song, and for a moment, Lily just stood there. She looked down at her shoes, then back up at the blinding lights, and then she spoke, her voice still small but steady. She said the song was for her mother. She said her mother worked really hard every single day so that Lily could have a better life. She said her mother never complained, even when she was tired, even when things were hard, and she said she wanted to make her mother proud. The audience went quiet. The judges exchanged glances. The woman with the sharp eyes raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. In the back row, Lily's mother pressed her hand to her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. The host smiled warmly and told Lily the stage was hers. Somewhere in the control booth, a technician prepared to start the backing track. But before the music began, one of the judges leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. He was a man known for being tough and honest. He had already decided this was going to be a waste of time. He glanced at the other judges and shook his head slightly. They had the same look in their eyes. Doubt. Impatience. They had seen too many kids crumble under the pressure. They had heard too many off-key voices and forgotten lyrics. And they were certain this would be no different. The other judge, a younger man with a reputation for having a soft heart, looked at Lily with pity. He felt sorry for her. She was clearly nervous, clearly out of her depth. He hoped she wouldn't embarrass herself too badly. Maybe they could let her down gently. Say something nice about her courage, for trying. And the woman with the sharp eyes? She was already reaching for her pen, ready to write notes about how to kindly tell this little girl that she wasn't ready for this level of competition. None of them believed in her. Not a single one. Lily stood there alone, under the brightest lights she had ever seen, in front of more people than she could count. She could feel the doubt in the room. She could sense that nobody expected anything from her. She was just a little girl in a homemade dress with squeaky shoes and a shaky voice. But what the judges didn't know, what the audience couldn't see, was the fire that burned inside that little girl's chest. They didn't know what she had been through. They didn't know how hard she had fought just to stand on this stage. They had already given up on her, and they were about to be proven very, very wrong. To understand what was about to happen on that stage, you need to know where Lily came from. You need to know the story behind those nervous eyes and that homemade dress, because this little girl didn't just show up out of nowhere. She had walked through fire to get here, and every step of that journey had shaped her into who she was. Lily was born in a small town where most people struggled to make ends meet. Her father left when she was only 2 years old. One day, he was there, and the next day, he was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. He just disappeared and never came back. All she knew was that it had always been just her and her mother, fighting through life together. Her mother worked at a local diner. She woke up before the sun came up and came home long after it went down. The work was hard, and the pay was barely enough to cover rent and groceries. Some months, they had to choose between paying the electricity bill or buying new shoes for Lily. Most of the time, the electricity won because her mother couldn't afford to lose the food in the fridge. So Lily learned to make do with shoes that were too tight or too worn out. Their apartment was small. Just 2 rooms and a tiny kitchen. The paint on the walls was peeling, and the radiator made strange noises at night. But Lily's mother did everything she could to make it feel like home. She hung up colorful curtains she found at a thrift store. She put pictures on the fridge that Lily had drawn at school. And every night, no matter how tired she was, She would tuck Lily into bed and tell her that things wouldn't always be this hard. Lily discovered music when she was 4 years old. Her mother had an old radio that barely worked. It crackled and hissed, and sometimes the signal would cut out completely. But when it did work, it filled their small apartment with songs from all over the world. Pop songs, country songs, old classics from decades ago. Lily would sit on the floor in front of that radio for hours, just listening. One evening, her mother came home from work to find Lily standing on a chair in the kitchen, holding a wooden spoon like a microphone, singing along to a song on the radio. Her little voice was loud and fearless, and she was completely lost in the music. She didn't even notice her mother standing in the doorway, watching her with tears in her eyes. From that moment on, singing became everything to Lily. She sang in the morning, while getting ready for school. She sang on the walk home. She sang while doing her homework and while helping her mother wash the dishes. The bathroom had the best acoustics in the apartment, so she would stand in front of the mirror and pretend she was performing for a huge crowd. She would imagine the lights, the applause, the feeling of being on a real stage, but there was no money for singing lessons. Other kids at school took piano classes and dance lessons and went to fancy music camps during the summer. Lily had none of that. All she had was the radio and her own determination. So, she taught herself. She would listen to a song over and over again, studying how the singer used their voice. She learned about breathing, about holding notes, about putting emotion into every word. She practiced until her throat was sore. And then, she practiced some more. School wasn't easy for her. Kids can be cruel, and they noticed that Lily's clothes were different. They noticed that she brought the same simple lunch every day, while they had snacks and treats. Some of them made fun of her. They called her names and laughed at her shoes. Lily tried not to let it bother her. But some nights she would come home and cry into her pillow, where her mother couldn't hear her. But even on the hardest days, music was her escape. When the kids at school were mean, she would hum a melody under her breath and imagine herself somewhere else. Somewhere bright and beautiful, where none of them could touch her. Singing made her feel powerful. It made her feel like she was worth something, even when the world tried to tell her she wasn't. Her mother saw what music did for Lily, and she did everything she could to encourage it. She couldn't afford lessons, but she could listen. Every night after dinner, Lily would give her mother a little concert in their living room. She would stand on the old rug in front of the couch and sing her heart out, while her mother sat and watched with a proud smile on her face. Those moments were precious to both of them. In those moments, they forgot about the bills and the long hours and the struggles. It was just the two of them, connected by love and music. When Lily was 7, her mother got sick. It wasn't anything life-threatening, but she had to take time off work to recover. Those few weeks were some of the hardest they had ever faced. With no paycheck coming in, they fell behind on rent. The landlord started leaving angry notes on their door. They had to skip meals some days, just to make the money stretch. Lily didn't fully understand what was happening, but she could see the worry in her mother's eyes. She could hear her crying softly at night, when she thought Lily was asleep. One evening during that difficult time, Lily walked into her mother's room and found her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at a stack of bills. Her face was pale, and she looked more tired than Lily had ever seen her. Without saying a word, Lily climbed onto the bed next to her mother and started to sing. It was a soft, gentle song, one they both loved. Her mother looked at her, surprised at first, but as Lily kept singing, something changed in her eyes. The worry didn't disappear, but it softened. She pulled Lily close and held her tight, and they stayed like that until the song was over. When Lily finished, her mother whispered that she had the voice of an angel. She said that one day, the whole world was going to hear that voice, and she made Lily promise that no matter what happened, she would never stop singing. Lily promised. Her mother eventually got better and went back to work. Things slowly returned to normal, or at least their version of normal. But Lily never forgot that moment. She never forgot the way her singing had brought comfort to her mother when nothing else could. And she carried that promise with her, every single day. A few months later, Lily saw a commercial on television for the talent competition. She watched as singers and dancers performed on that huge stage in front of thousands of people. Her eyes went wide. Her heart started beating faster. She turned to her mother and said she wanted to try out. She wanted to sing on that stage. Her mother hesitated. She knew how tough those competitions could be. She had seen the judges tear people apart on live television. The thought of her little girl going through that was almost too much to bear. But when she looked into Lily's eyes, she saw something she couldn't ignore. So she said yes. The audition process was long and exhausting. They had to travel to the city, which meant spending money they didn't really have. They waited in lines for hours, with hundreds of other hopefuls. Lily sang in front of producers and assistants who scribbled notes and barely looked at her. But she didn't give up. She gave everything she had, in every single audition. And somehow, against all odds, she made it through. She got the call that she had been selected to perform on the live show. Her mother cried when she heard the news. Lily just stood there, stunned, unable to believe it was real. Now here she was, standing on that stage, about to sing for the biggest audience of her life. Every struggle, every tear, every late night of practice had led to this moment. The judges didn't know any of this. The audience had no idea what this little girl had been through. They just saw a nervous child in a homemade dress. But Lily knew. And her mother, sitting in the back row, with tears streaming down her face, knew too. This was their moment. And nothing was going to take it away from them. The stage lights felt like they were burning into her skin. Lily stood there, gripping the microphone stand with both hands, trying to steady herself. Her palms were sweating so much she was afraid she might lose her grip. The audience was silent, waiting. The judges were watching. And somewhere in the back of the arena, her mother was holding her breath. The host had stepped aside, and now it was just Lily, alone, in front of thousands of strangers and millions more watching at home. This was the moment she had dreamed about for years. But now that it was here, it felt nothing like she had imagined. In her dreams, she was confident and fearless. In her dreams, she walked onto the stage like she belonged there. But this wasn't a dream. This was real, and the reality was terrifying. A voice came through the speakers, asking if she was ready for her music to begin. Lily tried to say yes, but her voice caught in her throat. She nodded instead, a tiny movement that she hoped someone had seen. There was a pause, and then the first notes of the backing track started to play. The melody filled the auditorium, soft and gentle at first. Lily knew this song better than she knew anything else in the world. She had practiced it hundreds of times. She knew exactly when to come in, exactly which breath to take, exactly how to shape every single word. But as the intro played on, something terrible happened. Her mind went blank. It was like someone had reached into her head and erased everything. The lyrics she had memorized, the timing she had perfected, the confidence she had built up over months of preparation, all of it vanished in an instant. She opened her mouth to sing, but nothing came out. The music kept playing, and her cue came and went. She missed it. A ripple of whispers spread through the audience. People shifted in their seats. Some exchanged awkward glances with the person next to them. On the judges' panel, the woman with the sharp eyes raised an eyebrow and wrote something on her notepad. The tough judge uncrossed his arms and leaned forward, his expression somewhere between annoyance and pity. The younger judge with the soft heart looked at Lily with genuine concern. The music stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. Lily stood frozen, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. She could feel her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Her legs felt weak, like they might give out at any moment. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to be anywhere but here. The host walked back onto the stage, his smile still in place but his eyes showing concern. He gently asked if she was okay. Lily tried to speak, but her voice came out as a cracked whisper. She said she was sorry. She asked if she could start again. The host looked over at the judges, waiting for their decision. The tough judge sighed heavily. He had seen enough nervous performers in his career to know where this was heading. In his experience, once someone fell apart like this, they rarely recovered. He exchanged a look with the other judges. The woman shrugged slightly, as if to say, it didn't matter either way. The younger judge nodded, willing to give the girl another chance even though he doubted it would make a difference. The host told Lily she could try again. He gave her an encouraging smile and stepped back. The audience waited. Though their energy had shifted, the excitement from earlier was gone, replaced by a kind of second-hand embarrassment. Nobody wanted to watch a little girl fail. But most of them expected that was exactly what they were about to see. In the back row, Lily's mother was barely holding herself together. Her hands were clasped so tightly, her knuckles had turned white. Tears were streaming down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. She couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. All she could do was watch her daughter standing alone on that enormous stage, looking smaller and more vulnerable than ever before. She wanted to run down there and scoop Lily up in her arms. She wanted to take her away from those lights and those cameras and those judging eyes. She wanted to protect her from the pain she knew was coming, but she couldn't. All she could do was sit there and hope. Hope that somehow, some way, her little girl would find the strength to get through this. Back on stage, Lily was fighting a battle inside her own head. Every fear she had ever had was screaming at her. The voice of doubt was louder than it had ever been, telling her she didn't belong here, telling her she was foolish to think she could compete with real singers, telling her she should just walk off the stage now and save herself the humiliation. She thought about all the times kids at school had made fun of her. She thought about the nights she had cried herself to sleep. She thought about how hard her mother worked just to keep them afloat. And now here she was, about to let everyone down, about to prove that all those people who doubted her were right. The backing track started again. The same gentle intro, the same familiar melody. Lily gripped the microphone even tighter. Her cue was coming. She could feel it approaching like a wave about to crash. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, and then she opened her mouth. But the sound that came out was wrong. Her voice cracked on the very first note. It was shaky and thin. Nothing like the powerful voice she had at home. The audience winced. One of the judges closed his eyes and shook his head slowly. This was painful to watch. Lily kept going, but every note felt like a struggle. Her voice wavered. Her timing was off. She forgot a line and had to skip ahead, stumbling over the words. The magic she felt when she sang in her bathroom, the freedom and joy she experienced when she performed for her mother, none of it was there. It was like someone had stolen her voice and left behind a broken imitation. Halfway through the first verse, the tough judge reached for his buzzer. His hand hovered over the red button that would end her performance right there. He had heard enough. This girl clearly wasn't ready. Better to stop now than drag out the embarrassment any longer. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the look on her face. Maybe it was the way she kept going, despite everything falling apart. Or maybe, just maybe, it was something in her eyes that told him there was more to this girl than what he was seeing. He pulled his hand back and crossed his arms again. He would let her finish. But his expectations were already set. This was a lost cause. Lily could feel the doubt in the room. She could sense that everyone had given up on her. And the worst part was, she had almost given up on herself. Her voice was failing her. Her body was shaking. Tears were starting to blur her vision. She thought about her mother. She thought about the promise she had made to never stop singing. She thought about all those nights practicing in front of the mirror, dreaming of this exact moment. Was this really how it was going to end? Was she going to let fear win after everything she had been through? The verse was almost over. The chorus was coming. This was her last chance. If she couldn't pull herself together now, it was over. Everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, would mean nothing. Lily closed her eyes. She blocked out the lights, the cameras, the judges, the thousands of staring faces. She took a deep breath, deeper than any breath she had ever taken, and somewhere in the back of her mind, she heard her mother's voice, soft and warm, saying the words she had heard 1,000 times before. "Your voice is your power," the chorus began. And in that moment, standing on the edge of complete disaster, something inside Lily shifted. Something that had been buried under all that fear and doubt finally broke free. She opened her eyes, and what happened next would change everything. The chorus hit, and Lily opened her mouth. But this time, something was different. This time, the sound that came out didn't belong to a scared little girl trembling under the spotlight. It belonged to someone else entirely. Someone powerful. Someone unstoppable. The first note of the chorus rang out across the auditorium like a bell. It was clear and strong and so full of emotion that it seemed to cut right through the air. The audience, who had been shifting uncomfortably in their seats just seconds ago, suddenly went still. People who had been whispering to each other stopped mid-sentence. Everyone froze. On the judges' panel, the tough judge who had been ready to press his buzzer slowly sat up straight. His eyes widened. The woman with the sharp tongue let her pen slip from her fingers. The younger judge's mouth fell open, and he didn't even try to close it. None of them could believe what they were hearing. Lily kept singing. And with every word, her voice grew stronger. The shakiness was gone. The fear was gone. All that was left was pure, raw talent pouring out of her like water from a broken dam. She wasn't just hitting the notes anymore. She was living inside them. Every lyric carried weight. Every breath told a story. This wasn't a performance. This was something much deeper than that. Her voice filled every corner of that massive arena. It reached the people in the front row and wrapped around them like a warm blanket. It climbed up to the balconies and touched the hearts of strangers who had never met this little girl before. It even reached the control booth, where the sound engineers sat frozen at their stations, unable to look away from the monitors. The audience began to react. At first, it was just a few gasps here and there. Then came the murmurs of disbelief. Then, one by one, people started to stand up. They rose from their seats without even thinking about it, pulled to their feet by something they couldn't explain. By the time Lily reached the middle of the chorus, half the arena was standing. In the back row, Lily's mother had both hands pressed against her chest. Tears were streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of worry anymore. These were tears of joy, of pride, of overwhelming love. She had always known what her daughter was capable of. She had heard that voice 1,000 times in their tiny apartment, but hearing it here, in this enormous space, filling the air and moving thousands of people, it was almost too much to take in. She whispered to herself, barely able to get the words out. "That's my baby. That's my little girl." Back on stage, Lily had her eyes closed again. But this time, it wasn't because she was scared. It was because she didn't need to see the audience to feel them. She could sense the shift in the room. She could feel the energy changing, building, growing with every note she sang. For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to truly connect with people through music. She thought about her mother working double shifts at the diner. She thought about the bills piling up on the kitchen table. She thought about the nights they had gone to bed hungry because there wasn't enough food. She thought about the kids at school who had called her names and made her feel worthless. And she poured all of it into her voice. Every struggle, Every tear, every moment of doubt became fuel for the fire burning inside her. The bridge of the song came, and Lily did something she hadn't planned. She stepped away from the microphone stand. She pulled the microphone free and held it in her small hand as she walked toward the edge of the stage. The spotlight followed her, and she stood there, looking out at the sea of faces, and she sang directly to them. Her voice soared. It climbed higher and higher, reaching notes that seemed impossible for someone her age. But she hit every single one of them with precision and power. The sound engineers in the booth scrambled to adjust their levels because the monitors were peaking. They had never seen anything like this. The tough judge was no longer leaning back in his chair. He was leaning forward, his elbows on the table, his eyes locked on the little girl in the homemade dress. His expression had completely changed. The doubt and impatience were gone, replaced by something that looked almost like awe. He had been doing this job for over 20 years, and he had seen some incredible performers in that time. But this was different. This was special. The woman with the sharp eyes wasn't writing notes anymore. She had given up trying to analyze what she was seeing. Some things couldn't be put into words. Some moments were too big to fit on a piece of paper. All she could do was watch and listen, and let the music wash over her. The younger judge was crying. He didn't even try to hide it. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he watched Lily pour her heart out on that stage. He had always believed in giving people second chances. He had always hoped that someone would come along and remind him why he loved music so much. And here she was, an 8-year-old girl from nowhere, with no training and no fancy clothes, delivering one of the most powerful performances he had ever witnessed. The final chorus arrived, and Lily gave it everything she had left. Her voice rang out with a strength that seemed to shake the very walls of the arena. People in the audience were openly sobbing. Strangers grabbed onto each other, overwhelmed by the emotion of the moment. Camera operators who had been doing this job for years found themselves wiping tears from their eyes as they tried to keep filming. And then came the final note. Lily held it longer than anyone expected. Her voice stretched out across the auditorium, pure and unwavering, like a beam of light cutting through the darkness. She held it for 5 seconds, then 10, then 15. The audience watched in disbelief, wondering how such a small body could produce such an enormous sound. Finally, she let the note fade. The last echo of her voice drifted up to the rafters and disappeared. And then there was silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The entire arena was frozen in time, suspended in the aftermath of what they had just witnessed. It was the kind of silence that only comes after something truly extraordinary. The kind of silence that speaks louder than any applause ever could. And then the dam broke. The audience erupted. The sound was deafening. Thousands of people screaming, cheering, clapping with everything they had. The standing ovations spread like wildfire until every single person in that arena was on their feet. The noise was so loud that Lily could feel it vibrating in her chest. She stood there at the edge of the stage, the microphone still in her hand, her chest heaving from the effort of the performance. She looked out at the crowd, at all those people who had doubted her just minutes ago, and she couldn't believe what she was seeing. They were cheering for her. They were crying for her. They were on their feet because of her. On the judges' panel, all 4 judges had risen from their seats. The tough judge was applauding slowly, his hands coming together with deliberate force, his eyes never leaving Lily's face. The woman with the sharp tongue had her hand over her heart, her usual composure completely shattered. The younger judge was still crying, clapping through his tears, shaking his head in amazement. The host walked back onto the stage, but even he seemed at a loss for words. He approached Lily and put a gentle hand on her shoulder, looking at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Because in a way, he was. They all were. What had started as an awkward, painful performance by a nervous little girl had transformed into something magical, something unforgettable, something that would be talked about for years to come. Lily had done the impossible. She had taken her fear and turned it into fuel. She had taken her pain and turned it into power. And in doing so, she had reminded everyone in that room of a simple truth that people so often forget. Greatness doesn't care about your age. It doesn't care about your background. It doesn't care about the odds stacked against you. Greatness only cares about heart. And this little girl had more heart than anyone had ever seen. The applause went on and on. It seemed like it would never stop. Lily stood at the edge of the stage, her small body trembling, but not from fear this time. She was shaking because she couldn't contain everything she was feeling. Joy, relief, disbelief. It was all hitting her at once, and she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So she did both. The host stood beside her, waiting for the crowd to settle down. But every time the cheering started to fade, someone would shout something or whistle, and it would build right back up again. People didn't want to stop. They wanted to hold on to this feeling for as long as possible. Moments like this didn't come around very often, and everyone in that arena knew they had just witnessed something rare. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the noise began to die down. People slowly returned to their seats, wiping their eyes and shaking their heads in amazement. The host took a deep breath and turned to the judges' panel. The younger judge went first. He was still emotional, his voice cracking as he tried to find the right words. He told Lily that in all his years of judging talent competitions, he had never experienced anything like what had just happened. He said that when she first walked onto the stage, he had felt sorry for her. He admitted that he didn't think she was ready for this level of competition. But then, she opened her mouth and proved him completely wrong. He said her voice had touched something deep inside him, something he didn't even know was there. And he thanked her for reminding him why music matters so much. The audience applauded again, and Lily whispered a quiet thank you into the microphone. Her cheeks were wet with tears, but she was smiling. The biggest smile she had ever smiled in her entire life. The woman with the sharp eyes spoke next. She was known for being tough and critical. She rarely gave compliments. And when she did, they were usually followed by a long list of things the performer needed to improve. But tonight was different. Tonight, she had nothing negative to say. She leaned forward and looked directly at Lily. She told her that she had been doing this job for a very long time. She had seen thousands of performers come and go. Some were good, some were great, but very few were unforgettable. And Lily, she said, was unforgettable. She told the little girl that her voice was a gift, but more importantly, her courage was a gift. The way she had stumbled and fallen and then picked herself back up in front of the whole world showed a kind of strength that most adults didn't have. She said she was honored to have been in the room for this moment. Lily didn't know what to say. She just nodded, her lips pressed together to keep herself from crying even harder. The woman smiled at her, a genuine warm smile that surprised everyone who knew her reputation. Then it was the tough judge's turn. The audience grew quiet. Everyone knew this man didn't hold back. He said exactly what he thought. No matter how harsh it might sound, people leaned forward in their seats, waiting to hear what he would say to this little girl who had just poured her heart out on stage. He sat in silence for a moment, just looking at Lily. His expression was hard to read. Then he spoke, and his voice was softer than anyone expected. He said he owed her an apology. He admitted that when she first walked out, he had already made up his mind about her. He had looked at her age, her nervousness, her homemade dress, and he had assumed she didn't belong here. He said he was ready to press his buzzer before she even sang a single note, and he was ashamed of that. He paused, and the arena was completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop, he continued. He said that what Lily had done tonight was the most incredible comeback he had ever seen in his entire career. He said she had taken the worst possible start and turned it into something magical. And she had done it not with fancy training or expensive coaches, but with pure heart and raw talent. He told her that she had taught him a lesson tonight. She had reminded him never to judge someone before giving them a chance to show what they're made of. Then he said something that made the whole audience gasp. He said that in 23 years of sitting behind this table, he had never given a standing ovation during the critique portion of the show. But tonight, he was going to break that rule. He pushed back his chair and stood up. He brought his hands together and started clapping, looking straight at Lily with respect in his eyes. The other judges stood up too. And then the audience followed. Within seconds, the entire arena was on its feet again, giving Lily her second standing ovation of the night. She broke down completely. The tears she had been trying to hold back came flooding out. She covered her face with her small hands, overwhelmed by everything that was happening. The host put a comforting arm around her shoulders and handed her a tissue. He told her she should be very proud of herself. But there was one more moment to come. The most important one of all. The host asked if there was anyone special in the audience Lily wanted to say something to. Without hesitation, Lily looked toward the back of the arena. Her voice was shaky but clear as she spoke into the microphone. She said this was all for her mom. She said her mom was the hardest working person she knew. She said her mom had given up so much just so Lily could have a chance at her dreams. She said her mom was her best friend, her hero, and the reason she never gave up, even when things got really hard. And she said she loved her more than anything in the whole world. The cameras found Lily's mother in the back row. She was a complete mess. Tears were pouring down her face, and she was shaking so hard, the people next to her were holding on to her to keep her steady. When she saw herself on the big screen above the stage, she covered her mouth with both hands. The host invited her to come down to the stage. The audience cheered and clapped as she made her way down the aisle, her legs barely working beneath her. Crew members helped her up the steps, and then she was there, standing in the spotlight with her daughter. Lily ran into her arms. The two of them held each other so tightly it looked like they would never let go. Lily buried her face in her mother's shoulder, and her mother stroked her hair, whispering something that only the two of them could hear. The cameras zoomed in on them, and millions of viewers watching at home felt their own eyes fill with tears. The host stepped back and let them have their moment. The judges watched from their seats, all of them visibly moved. The audience stayed on their feet, applauding softly, not wanting to interrupt but unable to stay silent. Finally, Lily's mother pulled back and held her daughter's face in her hands. She looked into her eyes and told her she had always known this day would come. She told her she was so proud of her, it hurt. And she told her that no matter what happened next, they had already won. Lily smiled through her tears and hugged her mother again. The two of them stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, on a stage that had seemed so terrifying just a short while ago. But it didn't feel scary anymore. It felt like exactly where they were meant to be. That night, Lily's performance became the most talked about moment of the entire competition. Videos of her singing spread across the internet within hours. People who had never watched the show before were sharing clips and telling their friends to watch. By the next morning, millions of people around the world knew her name. But none of that mattered to Lily. The fame, the attention, the headlines, none of it compared to that moment on stage with her mother. That was the real victory. That was what she would carry with her for the rest of her life. She had walked onto that stage as a scared little girl with a dream that felt too big for her small shoulders. She had stumbled. She had fallen. She had almost given up. But she didn't. She found her voice when it mattered most. And in doing so, she proved something to everyone watching. Something simple, but powerful. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter how small you are or how scared you feel. If you have a dream and you're willing to fight for it, anything is possible. The judges had lost hope in her. The audience had doubted her. Even she had doubted herself. But seconds later, an 8-year-old girl proved them all wrong.